Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. It's very nice to see you. When Robert told us that the book is coming out, I said, Michael, we need to arrange a party. And he said, why? And I said, because we want to share the occasion with friends and family, definitely. So, and I just wanted to say a couple of words about how this book came about. So you know that Michael has very strong opinions, and especially on politics, and sometimes he voices them really strongly. So in the run-up to Brexit referendum, our discussions were just one-sided because I was just sitting and listening and Michael was telling me everything he thought about it, even though we agreed on everything. And I didn't argue, and one day I said, Michael, would you like to write an article about it? So Michael said, okay, I'll write an article. And I said, why don't you send it to the Bruges Group, which, so Robert is the director of Bruges Group. It is an all-party think tank, and it's been set up after Mrs. Thatcher's famous speech in Bruges about the UK and the relationship with the European Union. So, and Michael sent the article, and Robert published it. So he published it on the Bruges Group website, and then, so Michael was writing articles, sending them in, Robert was publishing them, and then Robert said, why would you like to manage our blog? So Michael started doing that, and he was probably doing it so well that one day, just about probably under 3 years ago, Robert said, Michael, would you like to write a book and we'll publish it? And Michael said, on what topic? And Robert said, you choose.
Yeah, just stop talking to me.
So, and it's taken over 2.5 years of meticulous research, and it was so exciting. So every time I came back from office, every day, Michael was telling me a new discovery that he's made during the day by doing researching online libraries and books. So, and then this book came sort of to a near end, and we had a friend in the village. We have a friend in the village. He's a retired solicitor. So Michael asked him to look through the pages, and Farouk kindly read the pages. He actually printed them out, made notes, and they were meeting in the pub over a drink and discussing Farouk's notes so that the book can be improved. So now it's been edited. We loved the cover, by the way, Robert. So we were sent several versions of it, and this was our unanimous chosen cover. So, and to celebrate the release of the book about history of England, we brought you wine from an English vineyard, sparkling vineyard, just to mark the occasion. And the vineyard is amazing. Most of you have already been there because I took you all in there. And you're probably sick of listening about it. But it's a wonderful, the largest single organic vineyard in the UK, and they're carbon negative. And they produce the most amazing sparkling and still wine, and they win prizes everywhere. So they were kind, they sort of arranged the wine for us in the glasses. The glasses, so I know that some of you would like to take them home.
Yeah.
The glasses are on loan, so if you'd like to take them home, £3 a glass. So I'll finish writing about. So Michael.
Yes.
I'm very proud of Michael, what he has done, what he has achieved. And when the book came yesterday in the box, we were very pleased with that.
Thank you.
Oh.
We've been married now for 27 years, and my next task is to learn how to pronounce my wife's name, which I've never succeeded in doing properly, but there you are. But I think Sweetheart is a nice name anyway. I'd like to thank Robert of the Bruges Group. He's shown extraordinary patience as this book expanded from an original 120,000 words to triple that, I think, in the end. So I'm very grateful, thank you. My friend Farouk Gurash in the village has been really tremendously helpful with very early comments and advice and encouragement, and it was interesting to get a different perspective. I'd like to thank Sarab Chopra, who is the extraordinary and brilliant designer of the cover. It just really, wow, you know. I think if that's on display in a bookshop, people will want to pick it up. Lastly, I'd like to thank Gazelle, sorry, pronunciation. She's encouraged me, she's put up with my extremely chaotic ways of working, and she's organised this evening's event as well. So all the food, all the drink, everything, thank you, sweetheart. I tried very hard in the research. It took about 2.5 years to write this. I tried very hard to avoid two things. One is AI, which I absolutely loathe, and I'm thrilled that as a member of the Society of Authors, I am able to use the logo for human authored on my book, because I think there are so many books these days written by some weird AI program, and I think it's quite important to distinguish those that are written by people. The second thing I tried to avoid was modern sources. I've tried very hard to go back and find eyewitness accounts. I'm not saying that eyewitnesses can't be prejudiced, but I think if one can find several of them, it's possible to maybe distill a more accurate picture of what went on than to read somebody's take on what somebody else said about somebody else. So that was probably why it took so long. The book follows a narrative line basically through the reigns of monarchs. It's simply because that was the easiest way to organise it. I tried to put in a few what I think are called factoids, little snippets of things, which I hope might be interesting and explain other people, or to get other people to look more closely at some of the subjects. As a child, I was very interested in history, and I was frequently in serious trouble because I would still be reading history books when everybody else was doing sums, and I'd get beaten round the head. In those days, you got beaten round the head for not doing your sums. The thing which perplexed me more than anything else as a child was this constant nonsense, or sorry, what I believe is nonsense, about the Dark Ages. Because I just couldn't believe that the Dark Ages were really dark. And so maybe that was the reason I wrote this book. I think history is full of myths, and some myths are repeated often enough are accepted as truth. That's also true of propaganda. An example, in my view, of propaganda is the Dark Age myth. When Judaism was emerging as a religion, the ancestors of the English were developing a different kind of society in Northern Europe. Yes, they believed in gods and goddesses and fairies and hobgoblins, but they didn't have an organised religion. They didn't have a priestly caste. It was a society which was apparently based on equality of the sexes, the election of leaders, and meetings of the people in a folk moot to decide on the policy and the law. And we can find these concepts by reading Caesar and Tacitus, who reported, he didn't ever go there as far as I know, but he reported on travellers' tales who had been to Germania, as he called his book. According to the Dark Age narrative, England was a dark, savage, lawless place riddled with pagan superstition until along came Augustine in 597 and switched the light on. I'd just like to say that from my research, the ancestors of the English had law, democracy and organisation before Christianity existed. After the Roman withdrawal, Anglo-Saxons, Jutes and Frisians brought it to England in the 5th century. They became what we know as Anglo-Saxons, or the English. Before the arrival of Augustine in 597, the ancient system of laws and decision by folk moot governed the land. It was a society that was in many ways advanced of its time, and actually looking around the world, it's probably actually much in advance of most of the world today. The early English were practical, pragmatic, and applied common sense to problems. The world of Augustine was dominated by hierarchy and religion. The idea that success was possible without that must have actually been pretty terrifying. And so an alternative history was needed. Propaganda demonized the pre-Christian society, and the myth of a savage, illiterate, heathen society was born. Law was designed to keep the king's peace. The Germanic people had a well-established oral tradition, and laws were passed down from generation to generation. The earliest we have written down are those of King Ethelbert in 602, which was written actually in Anglo-Saxon, not in Latin. Augustine, by this time, had been in England for 5 years. He was a very, very fast worker with his followers, and by 602, he had amassed property that he needed protecting. And so the first 2 laws in Ethelbert's 602 law was actually about protecting church property and the people of the church. After that, the laws basically were things which would have been recognisable to the people that Tacitus described. I'll give you a quick example of their wonderful laws. If you got into a fight and you knocked somebody's teeth out, teeth had different value. You had to pay. You know, there was always a payment involved in Anglo-Saxon England. But the point is, each tooth had a different value, so that if you knocked somebody's front teeth out, it was going to cost you more than if you bashed their back teeth. So you had to be jolly careful where you hit somebody. I don't think that ever appeared in any kind of Latin laws that I'm aware of. I think a lot is written about the miraculous survival of the English language. I think what's as miraculous, maybe even more, is what I call the English essence. It's maybe the sensible way of looking at things. And maybe the sensible common sense way of looking at things was just too sensible to ignore. To our Anglo-Saxon ancestors, we owe trial by jury, bail, common law, our court system, democracy and parliament. I think we've lost sight of an amazing heritage. These days, there is so much commentary about how much we rely on the Judeo-Christian heritage. I don't think that's true. Everything we have today actually comes from an Anglo-Saxon heritage. And I sometimes hear some of the people banging on about Judeo-Christianity, and I just wonder where they're coming from. Anyway, that's a different story. I think wherever anybody comes from in this country, common sense is something everybody can relate to. And I think it's amazing how quickly you suddenly discover people from countries where normally you would use your elbows to get to the front of a queue, suddenly calmly standing in a queue, just like everybody was born here. So I think that's an example of what I call the English essence. It was the King's peace, basically. Over the centuries, Britain has welcomed many different people of different nationalities, and all of them have chosen to integrate. And I think a great example of that is, of course, Benjamin Disraeli. He was a third generation Sephardic Jewish immigrant who became probably one of the greatest prime ministers this country has ever had. I think in order to plan where we're going, we need to know where we come from. I hope this contribution of mine is going to shed some light on that. I think the elite reaction to Brexit shows that we have a lot more to do to get back to our democratic roots. Following the Brexit referendum, the fundamental principle of democracy, which is losers' consent, was denied. It was clear, oddly enough, both by statements in Parliament, for example, the second reading of the referendum bill, and by the leaflet which David Cameron spent, I think it was 8 million quid, sending everybody. That the commitment was, we'll respect whatever you vote for. Except, of course, when we didn't vote the way we were told to vote, they said no. And within hours, people who had voted for a referendum bill that was very clearly designed to give a final voice to the people said, oh no, that's no good because it's non-binding, having voted for it and said it was binding. Anyway, they did succeed ultimately in binding the government in such a way that when we finally left, it wasn't really leaving properly. I personally don't think it matters in the slightest whether one voted for or against in the referendum. What this comes down to is a belief in democracy. Because, as I said, without losers' consent, you do not have democracy. It doesn't exist. And I think this is the great tragedy of the last 10 years, that we have so many who actually deny the basic foundation of the democratic principle. I'm not religious in the slightest, and as far as I'm concerned, anybody can believe whatever they want to, as long as they don't come around and tell me that I have to believe what they believe and point a gun at me. What is important, in my view, is that our Anglo-Saxon heritage is one that predates Christianity and organised religion. I believe we should honour it and strive to return to its ethos. I think we need our folk right respected once again, and maybe a world without too much religion wouldn't be a bad place to be. Thank you very much all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for a wonderful speech and of course for your amazing book that you've written, worked so hard on. I just wonder if there's any questions from members of the audience.
I think it's fantastic what you say. It's cool.
Great, comment there.
What's that?
That your book is fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Merci, Josiane.
I think that it's an extremely positive message, which is free of prejudice in any particular order. I'm a great fan of Anglo-Saxon history myself, and the respect for the principles which were put in place as long ago as that. And the PR of the people who've won various battles subsequently trying to deny the existence of it is an embarrassment. I mean, Roosevelt himself said, I think, that a falsehood, however many times repeated, does not thereby become a truth. But then on the other hand, rumour has it that he knew all about the fact that Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor because he'd put them up to it effectively by starving them of oil. So there are many lessons which I think politicians in the modern world can do, like reading a decent book on history and learning from it.
But wasn't it Himmler who suggested that if you repeated a lie often enough, it became true?
Absolutely. Where have I heard that phrase recently?
Michael, about the universities trying to pretend that Anglo-Saxon doesn't exist in Anglo-Saxon society and peoples were
I know.
literally figment of people's imagination.
Yeah, it's just completely crazy. You know, and you get this stuff about, oh, well, they were all illiterate. They ignore runes, but mostly they ignore oral tradition. Many ancient peoples actually passed things down orally. The Celts did, the Germans did, and it doesn't diminish the value of what they passed down. And I also always point out a rather to me an interesting thing. I'm rather in love with the origin of words, and it always interests me that the origin of the word writing is from the very old German Ritan, and Ritan meant to inscribe runes. And the origin of the English word reading is from redan, in the same period, which meant to interpret the runes. And why would you have those words in your language if you were illiterate? What was the point of it? So I think it's a fascinating field, and one of these days I'd love to actually research more about Anglo-Saxon history in terms of beliefs and...
Is that
So-
volume 2 coming?
Sorry?
Is that volume 2 coming?
No, I'm working on something completely different. As they say.
Any other questions or comments before we go back to the wine and food? Kindly lay on.
Wine and food is good.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and of course, most of all, thank you, Michael. Thank you for all your hard work and giving us.
Thank you, Robert.
Very grateful to you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I don't know how he put this together in the way that he did, but it's wonderful. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Enjoy your time. Thank you.
Thank you.